Hi everyone, I'm a fisheries social scientist. I've been working on fisheries since the late 1970s and late 1990s, sorry, not late 1970s, that would make me really old. What I'm talking about today is a project I've been working on with Michelle Voyer and Nikki Mazer and some other people that we did in New South Wales, looking at contributions of the professional fishing industry, and then later on we added aquaculture to coastal communities in New South Wales. What we're focusing on this paper though is one part of the project that came out where we could see the connections between and the synergies between commercial fishing, professional fishing and recreational fishing, because it's often presented as a conflict, and also tourism. And so I'd like to point out on this poster, which people may have seen before, because this is something that came out for the early 2015 state election, and around the Central Coast, there was a call for professional fishing to be excluded from some areas. And some of these points here says millions of fish killed, tourism killed, fish nurseries killed, tourism and the environment, surely they count. This is presenting professional fishing in opposition to these other sectors of recreational fishing and tourism. But what I would like to argue in this afternoon is actually there's a lot of synergies. And there's sort of reasons why, both for rec fishing and for tourism, it's really important to have professional fishing. Now, the study we did, it was a large study. We had about 160 interviews with fishers and non-fishers in coastal communities up and down the coast. We also did some phone surveys and other kinds of surveys. One part of the phone survey was of the general public in coastal communities in New South Wales. There was 1,400 odd people called up as part of that phone survey. There was an economics portion of the project, and in this we looked at some of these connections between recreational fishing, professional fishing and tourism. One of the things that came up in the economics portion of the study, this is the existing economic figure on the contribution of professional fishing to New South Wales was what's called a gross value of production. And it's one of those figures that's very, a narrow version of the economic contribution. It's just the beach price times the volume of production. Whereas the recreational fishing figures included the costs associated with going on fishing trips. It's tackle, it's boats and accommodation and things like that. So a very expansive economic view. So that's one of the things that we needed to look at in our study, was to get a bigger picture of the flow-on effects of commercial fishing. And Nikki Mazer, who's going to talk later on in this panel, will talk about this more. But some of the just to point out, one of our findings, that gross value of production figure that had existed for professional fishing for that year was 81 million, or nearly 82 million. Once we did our study, we had this bigger picture of 436 million, and then we can start to see some of these connections through to other sectors here. We included some estimates of how professional fishing, through providing product for processing and retail, how that starts to come into the picture here. And also another thing we looked at was bait. Professional fishing provides bait for recreational fishing, and that we found about $10 million is spent on that annually. In our part of the phone survey, one of the things that we looked at, we asked questions to the general public about we asked them to agree or disagree with statements like, it's better for my local community to purchase local bait than bait sourced from other countries. It's better for the marine environment to purchase local bait for recreational fishing than bait sourced from other countries. And the results here were really interesting, because certainly here, I prefer to use local bait even if it's more expensive. And there was people do prefer to use local bait. But then these reasons, it wasn't so much, a little bit, it was that people thought they could catch more fish with local bait. But this was this really important reason here, that it's better for my local community to purchase local bait. So here, this is complicating that picture that we had in the first slide of recreational fishing and commercial fishing being in conflict. This is showing how, because this is recreational fishers who are answering this question, saying they do see that professional fishing is important for local communities and they want to support that in part through the buying of local bait. Some of the other things that came up in our interviews and things that helped show connections and synergies between rec fishing and professional fishing was, say, the sharing of knowledge. And I have a little quote here from a recreational fisher on the mid-north coast who said, "I know a lot of professional fishermen," and they'll say, "Oh, well, I'll give you a bit of information, you know. For example, if you're mackerel fishing, they'll tell you the water's cold or the water's hot or the bait's somewhere. And then you can get the bait early and you're fishing rather than spending half a day catching bait." So there were a lot of comments like this that came up. So sharing knowledge is an important synergy that wouldn't be there if the professional fishing wasn't there. Use of commercial jetties and wharves and other kind of shared infrastructure is something that a benefit the recreational fishing gets from having professional fishing in the same area. Search and rescue, the photo there shows how professional fishing often extends search and rescue help, including to recreational fishers. And I think about 62% of the fishers that we interviewed in the study had been involved in search and rescue activities, including for recreational fishers. And another important thing to consider is that recreational fishers also are consumers, buying the product of professional fishers. And they're a really important sector of the market, actually, because they're much more concerned than other consumers are about the provenance, and they want to buy local even more than the other consumers do. For example, in our survey it showed that they're much more likely to buy from the local co-op, which is often the place where you can most reliably be sure of getting local product. And this is a slide that helps show that with this survey question. Again, I'll read what it says down the bottom of those two columns where the circles are, where people were asked to agree or disagree. Eating seafood caught or grown in the local region is an important part of my coastal holiday experience. The answer that agrees with that were very high, but they were statistically significantly higher, like they were much higher there for people who identified as rec fishers than the normal population. And the next one is, I would be interested in watching commercial fishers at work when on a coastal holiday. So commercial fishers, recreational fishers are even more interested than the general public, and the general public is quite interested in watching commercial fishing at work. So when there are arguments that tourists or holidaymakers don't want to see dirty, smelly commercial fishing or working fishing ports, it's not borne out by the figures. And here's another quote to read. This is from a co-op manager. People love watching. They come down and watch the boats unload. They see what sort of fish are coming in, and they see it getting wheeled over to the shops. And they know there's stuff going in there from the local fishermen. It's a draw card, really. People love going to the seaside ports. I'm watching, not only here, but everywhere along the coast. And that's certainly something that came through quite strongly in our study. So in my last minute, I've just got some recommendations that can come through from the work we did about how to build on this understanding that there are synergies between these sectors rather than necessarily seeing them always as being in conflict. One is to build on seafood tourism, so showcasing local seafood products. I'm sure quite a lot of the people here are doing that already. Another thing is this is trickier, and it's to do with logistics, and some of the stuff we heard this morning could be quite exciting about how the logistics might work better in the future with new technologies, because supply chain of getting locally caught fish into the local restaurants is sometimes really difficult. And also to perhaps some active management of these conflicts that come up between recreational fishers and professional fishers, rather than just letting them fester, is actively and there might be a role for government in this, in some conflict resolution exercises, and some getting people to think beyond the recreational fishing haven as ways to allow recreational fishers to enjoy the same space as professional fishers, rather than just thinking that the solution is to get rid of them. And also to build on this understanding that recreational fishers are an important segment of the market for professional fishing as well. They're discerning seafood consumers, and there might be a way of building on that.